Welcome to the Texas Association for College Admissions Counseling Virtual College Fair panel Applying to College in 2021-2022. We're excited to have you participating in this event. We have some fantastic schools here with us today. My name is Anna and I'll be your facilitator. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Your camera and microphone are off so the panelists cannot see or hear you. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the schedule on the website. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/Texas. And now I'd like to turn it over to our presenters. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Anna. Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for spending a bit of your afternoon with us. My name is Elizabeth Jones, and I am a career educator and college counselor, and I also serve as one of the College Fair co-chairs for the Texas Association for College Admission Counseling. And we're so thrilled with TACAC's partnership with StriveScan and our ability to do this today. So we have over 100 colleges from around the country and the world registered, and over 700 students and families and educators registered to participate. So we hope that you'll stay for the fair after this. And if you've not already registered for tomorrow's fair, there's still time to do that. And we are also having a pre-fair session tomorrow that will take place at the same time. And that session is focused on applying to college. So hopefully you will enjoy that one as well. So during the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to ask our panelists a series of questions and ask them to share their guidance and advice on the college application process. But we're going to begin with some introductions. So panelists, can you begin by introducing yourself, your name and the institution you work for, and briefly maybe what draws you to this work?
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't know if you can give 5 seasoned admission counselors a microphone and ask them to be brief, but we'll try. But thank you. My name is Rod Jackson, Senior Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission, and also work with diversity initiatives at SMU. And my answer is short and sweet. The thing that draws me to this profession are the students. Being able to see these young, bushy-eyed, bright-tailed young people become young adults and go through that whole process is wonderful for me, so I enjoy it.
And I'll go next. I'm Beverly Henry Wheeler with Hendrix College out of Conway, Arkansas. And Rod, you stole my answer. It really is the students. I've been doing this for 35 years, and every institution, I've been asked that question. And I have to say, each institution is the students. It's you. It's your legacy. And seeing you transform from freshman to senior to actually alums. So that's what keeps me in this.
Let me jump in here before there's nothing else to say at all, because I 100% agree with everyone. I'm Raymond Blakely, and I serve as Director of Recruitment at the University of Texas at Austin. And is it okay to say ditto? Is that okay? I think the people that are on this panel today, you're going to hear some really good advice from us all. I think one other thing that is kind of a motivator for me is I remember what it was like for me going through this process. And I haven't been doing this for 35 years, but 23 years. And that's a long time to be having that regeneration every year of a new class. But we're so excited to chat with you today and looking forward to learning from some of these folks as well.
What's going on, team? My name is Jose de Jesus Gil. I serve as the Dean of Enrollment Management at San Jacinto College. It's a 2-year institution in the Houston area. And I think ditto as well, as Raymond has said. One of the things that really drives my work is being able to be part of this space where we get to provide an educational outlet for students. I know what it did to me when I was in college. We're in high school transitioning into college. So I really wanted to do that for other folks as well. So that really is sort of the reason why it draws me my work.
And I think I get to close things off because I'm the newbie of the group, right? My name is Aspen Arnold. I am the Texas Regional Admissions Counselor for Michigan State University. So based in Texas, but work with students throughout the state. But my university is obviously located in East Lansing, Michigan. I have not been doing this for 23 years, but I've been doing this since 2015. And one of the things, other than, of course, the students, I love seeing students and families that are excited to really pave their own way. I've always worked for out-of-state institutions, and that's something I'm really passionate about, is finding those students that want to be the only kiddo from their high school to go to a university and really spread their wings and see them kind of create a new name for themselves when it comes to their college journey.
Thanks, everyone. My goodness, this really is an incredible group. I'm excited for this conversation. So we're going to talk a lot about applying to college and all the pieces that come together to make this happen for you all, the students. So we're going to get started with talking about the different types of applications that you might encounter as you go through this process. So Jose, can you kick us off and share a little bit of insight as a starting point for the different types of applications that students may encounter?
Yeah, so there are numerous types of applications that you as a student are going to encounter during the college admissions or the application process. Most commonly, and that's pun intended right there, is the Common App or the Common Application, which really does allow students to complete one application and send multiple sort of copies to any member school of the Common App, right? There's, I believe, more than 9,000 probably sort of schools across the country that use the Common App, and students really get an opportunity to sort of fill out an application and send it to multiple schools. The Common App oftentimes does promote sort of a holistic application review by requiring students to submit several components like a personal essay, letters of recommendation, and an overview of those extracurricular activities that that students are a part of. But then there's also individual college applications. For example, San Jacinto College has an individual college application that is strictly for that institution itself. And most colleges sort of offer these for the population of students that they're servicing. And you would just submit, and that application would go directly to the college that you are reviewing. And then we also have a lot of sort of systems, as I would call them, that share an application. One that comes to mind is for those students who are thinking of out of state is like the SUNY system, the State University of New York, which has a general application for all of the colleges and universities that fall within that system. And that is sort of similar to that Common App, but is specifically for the SUNY system.
I would say two others that are very similar to the Common App are the Coalition application. Quite a few students will use the Coalition, and for those, of course, here in the great state of Texas, you have Apply Texas, which is also probably very popular, obviously, here in Texas. But it gives you that opportunity to apply to a number of different schools using one application. Typically, most of these applications open in August. Don't quote me if I'm wrong on that. So you can start using them in August of your senior year to apply to colleges.
Thanks. So one thing that students may have on their mind is standardized testing and sort of understanding the role of standardized testing in this process, if it's going to play a part in their process. So I'm hoping for some insight on that. Beverly, will you kick us off with that question?
I will kick us off. So students, I like to preference with kind of giving you 6 categories that may or may not be used in the admissions process. And of course, standardized testing might be one of those. So I like to say your transcript, academic record, that goes together, testing. And this is where we'll talk about test optional or actually SAT or ACT. Your actually essay may be used, the recommendation, your extracurricular activities, and some universities might require an interview. So with standardized testing, you have the opportunity to submit test scores with the SAT or ACT. Several times students will say, should I do it now? Because I'm hearing test optional. And my university, we went test optional pre-COVID because we are a smaller liberal arts school and we're focusing more on those other aspects that I mentioned versus the test score. So when you hear the word test optional, you want to think about, is that test optional meaning just for admissions, or is it test blind, meaning that they will not look at your test scores for admissions nor scholarships? And so there are several kind of language things out there with submitting your test, which is the SAT or ACT, or test optional, submitting it just for admissions, or test blind, where they're not, you don't have to submit it for admissions nor for scholarships. Aspen, I'll let you jump in and kind of add to that.
Awesome. Thanks, Beverly, for kind of painting that picture. Obviously, test optional is a term that we're hearing a little bit more often. Another thing that you're going to hear our panelists say is that it depends on each institution on what those policies are going to look like and how those standardized tests are going to play a role in your admissions decision. So the way that Michigan State may review a test score may be different than the way that UT Austin does. Again, it's going to depend on each institution. And so one of the questions that I'm getting as an institution that is optional as a result of the lack of testing over the last 18 months is, should I submit these test scores? We've been really fortunate that many of the high schools in Texas have still heard on their campuses. So you may be a junior or a senior that have had the opportunity to take the SAT or ACT score. So how do you determine whether it supports your application? And there's a couple things that I would advise. I would definitely advise reaching out to your high school counselors. They're going to be a great resource at understanding what the acceptance rates are, what that profile of an admitted student at a particular institution looks like, and help you determine how does that test score help you within that. I think for some of our institutions, Michigan State being one, so your admissions counselors, just like those
Aspen, it looks like your internet is kind of freezing up a little bit.
sounds about right.
That's okay. But I think you were getting at basically there are different types of ways that schools will deal with tests. And certainly that is one of the best answers. I mean, it depends. So one of the best things you can do is connect with an admission counselor and see what the test means to them. Some terms to remind again that you mentioned: test optional, test blind, and test flexible. Each one of those means different things. For a school like UT Austin, we don't use any of those terms. We just simply suspended the use of the test, the requirement of the test for the entering fall 22 freshman class, as well as 21. So for those that are here and those that are applying right now. And what that means for us is, and the bigger piece of it is, and I think this may be something that we all can kind of speak to, some campuses, and I'll say for UT Austin, the test has really never been a big determining factor, right? When we use holistic review, it's just one of many factors. And so the fact that we don't have it is really not that big of a deal. Now, there are places where it means a whole lot because they've got this scale that they're making a decision on, where you meet this test score and this GPA or this class rank. So again, going to those admission sites, talking with the professionals and kind of getting an understanding as to what it means their specific campuses is really important.
And one last
Raymond,
thing to note.
I'm
Go ahead, Beverly.
Raymond, I think that's good to know, but also along with that, I would tell you students, look at the profile of the universities that you're interested in, and they will have information as far as range of if they are requiring test scores, what that range looks like. Jose, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to add that as a tool for the students. So you won't go into the university being blind. And that type of information, you'll find it on our website, and you'll be able to see the average SAT, ACT for that university, or if they were, what they're required as far as optional is. Jose, I'll give it back to you.
No, I just wanted to also note that there is a lot of open access institutions, the two-year schools, right, community colleges who don't require tests as part of their entry process. So for those students who are interested in associate's degrees or certificate programs, that's one sort of route that you can go to in order to avoid some of those institutions that do require tests as a means of admissions.
Oh, thank you all. What great advice. So we're going to shift the conversation a little bit away from testing and talk about another part of the application process that some students may experience depending on the school and where they're looking, and that's college essays. We know that these can vary greatly in terms of length and in terms of content and in terms of requirements. But I'm curious to know what advice this group has for students who may encounter essays as part of the college application process.
Raymond, I think we're going to let you answer that one.
I'll start it off at least. So yes, essays are an important part of some for some schools' applications. For us, it definitely is a part of it. One piece of advice that I'll give, I guess that's the question that you're asking as it relates to essays. So one piece of advice that you will get that you shouldn't use is write one essay and send it to every college that you're applying to. Because guess what you end up doing? Sometimes you forget to change the name that you refer to in the essay. And that happens a lot more than you think. So, you know, but really and truly, we have essay prompts. And these prompts are really getting at what we want to know about you. And the essay is a great opportunity for us to get another layer of information. I think we think about it like everybody always talks about onions having layers, and we really want to know more about you, not just the grades, not just the, you know, that you went to such and such school and they've got this profile, but the full picture, any challenges that you face. How did you get to where you are today? Leadership. Why did you choose the major that you're interested in studying at our institution? So, and I think there's another quick point that I'll make. There's a difference between an essay and a short answer question. So short answers are just that, short answers. So one way to not be a good friend of an admissions officer is to write an essay for a short answer, but I'm just joking. I will read everything that you submit, but short answers are really, don't stress yourself out more than anything. Short answers are really getting at that prompt. So there's an essay and then there's short answers. But again, some institutions don't require them.
Exactly. Great answer. You know, I don't understand how Raymond and I have been in the profession the same amount of time, and he looks so much younger than me, but I digress. Essays, I think he's hit the nail on the head. Great summary of that. But I guess if I'll add anything to that, is it's a chance for you to tell your story. But here's the kicker. Oftentimes students think, well, my story is not unique. I remember working with a young lady who worked to help take care of her family. She was like a mother to her younger siblings. She was still involved in school, and she thought, hey, that's what everyone does, right? Well, no. Sometimes your stories are unique. Sometimes your stories are just unique to you, even if you think they're not unique. And just as Raymond said, the more we know about you, the better of a contextual read we can get of your file and know a little more about who you are. So take your time and tell us more about you. Don't be afraid to brag either. It's not bragging. You're just telling us who you are, and that's what we want to know.
Oh, that's such great advice. So we know that we're all here because we love to get to know students, right? And that's such an important part of the work that we do. And certainly we use essays to get to know students. And for some colleges, letters of recommendation is another great way that we get to know students for those that require that piece of information, or if they don't require it, they allow it to be submitted. So for those who are considering submitting letters of recommendation or are required to submit letters of recommendation, what thoughts do you have for those students as they're thinking about asking recommenders, and really how are they used in this application process?
Awesome. I'll jump in with that because I often have students say, I'm from a large high school, and so my counselor doesn't know me. And so how can they write a rec for me? And then I have those students who are at smaller schools and the counselor does know them. They spend time and are able to write that information. The first thing I want to tell students is don't be alarmed that your counselors don't know you. The recommendation is important because it's confirming GPA, it's confirming the profile of the school, it's confirming ranking if your high school ranks. And at times, the recommender, one of my schools, even though they had 1,500 in their senior class, they had a process in which to gather information before they wrote their recommendation. And so for me, in all the different universities that I've worked for, the recommendation to me is like maybe a painting in the room. It is not the foundation, but it adds accents or information that I may not be able to see in your grades, or if you're submitting test scores and your test scores, or even your extracurricular activity. I'm just going to tag the essay because I feel that the essay is where your voice, you get to write about you. The recommendation is someone else's voice writing and supporting you as well. And I will say this in the end, I've never had a recommendation to keep a student out of my institution, but I have had recommendations that have gotten students in to my institutions.
I will say just quickly, as part of my college admissions process many years ago. I'm not going to say the actual number. I was unaware that not only a college counselor could write a letter of recommendation, and oftentimes a lot of the students feel like that's the only sort of person who can do that for you. And as Beverly mentioned, they're painting a picture of support. And who else other than a counselor supports you at an everyday basis at your institution or your high school? That would be your teachers, right? So getting that person who has really seen you develop through your educational journey at within your high school is really another sort of person who can provide great insight and support of that packet as a whole for you as a student. So don't just fixate yourself on the school counselor. There are other resources available for you. Those teachers, those English teachers that have seen you develop throughout the years are really there to support you as well. So think about them when you're thinking about who can write this letter of recommendation for me.
And Jose, that is such a great point that you brought up teachers. And I also want to bring up individuals where you work, where you volunteer at your church, if you're attending a youth group. And so remember, the recommendations is giving us information that we won't get from your transcript to help universities know more about you. So Jose, thank you for mentioning that.
And Jose, you alluded to our next question a little bit in your response, but some students might be here today who are thinking about circumstances that have impacted their high school experience, right? And certainly with the last couple of years, and we know that the learning experience for many has looked different as we've gone from school to home and maybe back and forth again, right? So students might be thinking about extenuating circumstances that could include learning or their family or personal or social, emotional, all sorts of things, right? Can fall into this. But for those students for whom this is a really important part of their story and their journey, how is how should they communicate this, right? What is the best way for them to get this information to colleges so that they understand that? And then what do colleges ultimately do with this information?
I think, Elizabeth, a lot of the, or the last two questions that have been asked regarding the essays as well as letters of recommendations are two application where students really can paint that picture of what you've been going through and add that, what I call color commentary, right, to your application. What can we not see on that transcript or test scores that have really made an impact? So know that your essay question can be kind of skewed in that direction to really talk about some of the things that you've endured over the last couple of years or throughout your lifetime that maybe would have had an impact on grades or that academic profile. Again, that letter of recommendation, I think sometimes students are hesitant to talk about their challenges because they do want to bring them to light. They're worried that they might harm their chances of being admissible to a particular school or like that. So I think in some instances, those recommendation and your recommenders are great advocates for you to just say what a great job you've been doing or what maybe you've endured that you didn't feel comfortable sharing, but that can help, again, understand what your academic performance had been like, or maybe what situation you'd been dealing with at home. The other thing that I've seen a lot lately is there's two sections. There's a supplemental information question or supplement, I think that's what it's called, on the Common Application. And that's what I really advise students to use to their advantage. If they have something to point out about a dip in grades for an let's say you had a health issue and it really impacted your grades for that semester, use that supplemental feedback in order to paint that picture. Don't take away from your essay that's going to talk to us about who you are as a student and all that you have to contribute to our universities, but that supplemental form is a great option. The other thing that we have had over the last two admission cycles is a COVID-19 and natural disaster response. And so if you have been impacted pretty drastically, which I think we've all been impacted in some way or another with COVID, we've now been given a space for you to respond to how that impacted you. I think Elizabeth, you alluded to, how did your grades change maybe when you were in person versus online? That's the section for you to really hone in on those two factors, because we all know that everybody's experiencing COVID. And so we don't want it to take away from that essay where you get to paint yourself in a unique light. But that's another area of that application you can provide feedback.
And I would just quickly mention, in terms of COVID-19, I would steer away from just using COVID-19 as, think deeper into those extraneous circumstances and really give a full thought out response, right? I don't want to see students just writing, I've been impacted by COVID-19, so this is what it is. I think I would challenge those students to sort of start peeling those layers, right, as Raymond said earlier, and really get to the root as to, what the question is at hand, right? How has COVID impacted you? And really give us some thorough answers and responses to that question, which can ultimately sort of benefit you as a student. It shows your perseverance, right? It shows your excellence. And how you were able to overcome a lot of those things. And that's an opportunity for you to explain to that reviewer of that application why you would be an asset to that institution.
We've touched on a lot of different parts of many different types of applications, but to sort of sum all this up, right, knowing that colleges do have different review processes, right, at their institutions, but can you share a little bit of information about the factors that are important, right, to colleges, understanding, right, that review processes will look different? Rod, will you kick us off with this one?
Yeah, I sure will. And I'll start off with an answer that everyone's going to say, really, I knew he was going to say that, but every single part of the application that we asked for is the most important. And let me put that into context for you all. Every institution represented on this call receives thousands of applications per year. And that takes a lot of hours, a lot of manpower, resources that go into reviewing these files. And it makes for some really long work days, sometimes even past the work hours. So if there's any way that we could reduce what we're reading to try to be more thorough and get a little deeper into the files, we would. So everything we ask for is there specifically for a reason. And it's not because one piece weighs more than another. It's really a holistic and contextual review. We need that essay, just as Raymond talked about earlier, to really learn more about you. We need, of course, that transcript to see how well you've done. We need to see what type of grades you, those recommendation letters. We want to know what type of academic promise students have. So it really paints an entire picture for us. So I really can't say that there's one piece that weighs heavier than another, but it's really the whole that we're looking at when we're trying to review and make decisions that affects your lives and our institutions.
Yeah, I mean, Rod, I think you're preaching. I mean, at this point, there really isn't a magic formula, and every institution is a little bit different. And to be honest with you, every admissions counselor within an institution reads a little bit differently too, right? We're coming with our own experiences. And so one of the things I like to tell students is, we're not looking for ways to deny you, we're looking for ways to admit you. And we want students to be successful on our campuses. And so that's why we're asking for those components of your application. And each of these different components are equally as important and play a different unique factor. And so I know it sounds scary at this point. We're telling you about this huge list of items that you need to submit and are going to make and break your future. That's not the case. We're here to support you, and we want to make sure that those documents that you're submitting and what you're sharing with us is going to make you a good fit in a bunch of different social, financial, academic factors on our university's campuses.
Aspen, I'm going to jump in with both what you and Rod are saying and say this to the students. Look at the admissions process and what they're asking, and then make sure it's a fit for you. A lot of times we look at universities past the admissions point. What do I mean by that? What if you're not an excellent writer, for example, and that scares you? Well, look at an institution that does not require an essay. If you're a wonderful speaker and you get your ideas through verbal communications, you might want to look at some universities that allow you an interview to express that. If you're a great test taker, because I don't want anybody to think, well, I'm a great test taker, so no one wants scores now. Look at universities that maybe they only have a couple of factors. I do not want anyone to go away from here overwhelmed by all the different parts to the admissions process, because one of the things I did learn when I was president of NACAC, a number, and it was over 4,000 universities just in the United States. And then if you added technical, community college, international, it grew, right? So there is at least one institution that will fit you in the process for that. So we're talking about all the factors, but I'm also talking about fit in the factor. I just kind of want to add at that as we're talking.
Thank you, Beverly. So after this, students are going to have the chance to engage and connect with colleges both today and tomorrow in the college fair. So advice that you have for students, whether they're heading into whether they're in their senior year, whether they're in their freshman year, somewhere in between, but advice as they engage, in virtual college fairs, if they have the opportunity for in-person college fairs, but just advice at this point, specifically for tonight's program and maybe beyond in connecting with colleges.
Hey, I'm happy to kick it off. I wanted to say something earlier about this whole test optional stuff too, because I know sometimes this is hard to navigate. So this is a great time to give some advice. I know that some of you, maybe juniors or seniors, right? Mostly seniors. Some of you are hesitant to send your test scores to schools because you're afraid that if you send the score, that it's going to automatically be a part of your review process. And I can speak, and if, Rod, if I'm wrong for you all, and Beverly, you guys can, and Michigan State, whatever, let me know. But I can tell you, for most schools, the people that actually receive the test scores are not the same people that review your file, right? And so if we are saying that we are going to offer you a test optional, test blind, test flexible admissions experience, remember, we're going to do that. The good thing about sending your test scores, though, to schools is that it does give you an opportunity to get on mailing lists. I'm speaking mainly to juniors, sophomores, and so on and so forth, because it's a way that you express your interest. You can also express your interest by just filling out an inquiry form. But one thing that we've noticed is a lot of kids are like, I'm not going to send my score because I'm not sure if it's not going to be used just because you send it. It will be used once you submit an application and you indicate, in most cases, how you want it to be used. So that's a little bit of a piece of advice. But one big thing as you go through this process, remember, and I think one of my colleagues said this earlier, remember that it's all about you. It's not about me. It's not about the school I work at. It's about you. You own this process. So you need to be in the driver's seat. Miss Beverly gave you some really good advice about how to use your strengths to use it in the application process. You own this process, because at the end of the day, you are going to be happy at an institution. And guess what? If you're not happy at that institution, you can always transfer. We don't talk about that enough, but there are transfer opportunities as well. I'm a transfer student myself, and I finished 2 degrees, and I'm working on a doctorate right now. None of them were at the same institution. Consider that as well. Thank you so much.
I would just,
Oh,
go ahead, Aspen.
No, Jose, I don't need to talk on you. Go ahead and I'll come after.
No, how can I explain this? I think it's something that I always tell the students. You have to also give part of yourself to this experience. You have to come ready to want to learn. And us as college admissions practitioners, don't do this work because it's sort of a thing to do. We really care about this experience. And we love to sort of have that dialogue with students. Have your questions ready, right? Ask those questions that are really important to you and your parents and your guardians, and use that as an opportunity to get to know the institution. One thing that I always tell all of my students is that you are applying to these institutions, right? But you are interviewing them. You are interviewing them to see if you are a good fit for them. You are an asset to UT Austin, to SMU, to Michigan State, to San Jacinto College. They want you. So the intimidation, of course, is going to be there, whether test optional or not. Am I going to get accepted or not? But remember that you are always going to be at the driver's seat of this experience. And you have to be able to be ready to drive. And that is to ask those questions, connect with that admissions counselor, bug them as much as you can. Because one, they have to tell their supervisor, I'm getting bugged, right? And two, you want to be able to make the best decision for yourself. Those are 4 years, and oftentimes 2 or 3 or 4, whichever your college experience is. But those are 4 years you're not going to get back. So if you don't take control of that driver's seat and make the decision for yourself, it's going to be a waste. And I would hate that to happen to anyone. So as much as you are applying to an institution, you're interviewing them as well. Remember, you're the one with the money.
I love that. That's like a mic drop, right? We probably should have just ended there with the advice. I'm going to back things up for a quick minute and just to answer Elizabeth's question specifically about the college fair tonight, because we're really excited to be partnering with StriveScan and the opportunity for you all, not just to learn general information, which We were trying to be pretty general, if you can tell, about admissions processes, but we want to make sure that you're learning about if different institutions, including the institutions that are represented here tonight during the StriveScan presentation. So one of the things that I think that will really maximize your experience, and I think the great part of the format of tonight's college fair is that when you go to a session tonight, you're not just going to hear from one institution that you're already interested in. You're going to hear from 6 different institutions, and these are presentations. And so I love this format because you may have heard about Michigan State. Your parents might have gone to Michigan State, so you're interested in learning about us. But you're also going to be hearing from 5 other institutions that maybe you're not familiar with. And something that they share tonight might really record and pique your interest. Leave tonight wanting to learn more about that particular institution that you weren't familiar with. So go in with an open mind and don't just listen to the 6 minutes that the school that you're familiar with is talking, but really divulge into all of the information that the different institutions share, because I think you're going to be really surprised by some of the other schools you're not as familiar with that might be a really good fit for each of you.
We have just a few minutes left. Beverly and Rod, do you want to share your parting advice and words for the group?
Sure. I would probably, because I work for Hendrix College, but I graduated from a larger institution. And I want you to do something different tonight. Go where you don't know. The schools that maybe were on TV this weekend or in Texas, you may know them, but venture out, right? Because right now you're window shopping. So I would say definitely go to the fair, go to as many as you can, but go choose 6 that you've never heard of and go and listen. And listen from the perspective of, is this a fit for me? Am I hearing something that triggers my heart? Let me do more investigation. That's what I would say.
It's always hard to follow Beverly. That's great advice. I guess if I have one piece to add, it's probably easier said than done. I understand, maybe it's your junior year this year. Some of you maybe your senior year, but try to have fun with the process. I hear about students stressing out over it so frequently. And I'm a little older. I know Jose talked about how many years ago it was he went through this process, but years ago, when I went through the process, you applied to 2 or 3 schools, you got in and you picked one. It was just that simple. And now, it's a little more involved, but still try to have fun with the process. Just know at the end of the day, you're going to find a school that you want to attend and and the school will want you as well. You'll attend that school, you'll have a great time, and things will work out. So if you go into it with the idea of, I know that this process is going to work out, so let me try to enjoy the ride instead of stressing out over it. Again, easier said than done, but I encourage you to try to have as much fun as possible as you go through this process.
Oh, thank you all so much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your advice, for your partnership, your friendship in this profession as well. But really, thank you. And StriveScan, thank you, Anna, if you're still on. Thank you so much for this time. And students, enjoy the fair tonight. If you have not registered for tomorrow, registration does stay open throughout the fair. So please register for tomorrow. And this same time tomorrow will be another session, like I mentioned at the beginning. And the focus of tomorrow's session will be specifically on paying for college. So I encourage you to join that session as well. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for presenting. That was great. Like Elizabeth said, please do check back at the schedule and sign up for more sessions. And when you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 5-question survey. We'll appreciate any feedback you can provide. And you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all of the other sessions recordings at strivescan.com/Texas. So thanks again, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye.